Maggie Murdaugh once enjoyed a life of luxury with big houses, private islands, private planes, chartered planes, expensive clothes, and expensive trips. But the happy moments quickly faded away after her son's Paul fatal boat crash, and husband's Alex Murdaugh crimes started to come out, leading him to plan his elimination plot to take the lives of Paul and Maggie. Hello, True Crime Stories podcast. Welcome to episode 4. Maggie Murdaugh is known for her brutal death committed by her husband Alex Murdaugh. But today we are going to talk about her life and what kind of person she was. People have mixed feelings about the type of person they remember Maggie as. Maggie and Paul's graves are an attraction for visitors, but their graves still remain without headstones. The graves are marked with small plastic plaques surrounded by flowers, faded cloth bouquets, trinkets, and a small statue of Maggie's favorite dog Bubba in the shade of a towering oak tree. It's so sad that years later the markers sit 3 feet from the huge marble headstone of Alex Murdaugh's father, Randolph Murdaugh, who died 3 days after Paul and Maggie. Alex's father have a nice headstone, although the cemetery where they are buried confirmed that there is a delay with Paul and Maggie's headstones. Maggie Murdaugh's parents, Terry and Kennedy Branstetter, were high school sweethearts. In 1960, they met at Caverna High School in Tiny Horse Cave, Kentucky. They were still underage when they decided to get married, so they had to cross the border into Tennessee to get married. Maggie was born on September 15, 1968, into a healthy, loving, stable household, with her parents in Nashville, Tennessee. They named her Margaret Kennedy Branstetter. She died on June 7, 2021, at the age of 52 in Islandton, South Carolina, after her husband Alex Murdaugh lured her to their Moselle hunting lodge and fatally shot her 5 times. Maggie had one sister named Marion Proctor, who was 5 years older than her. Maggie grew up in South Carolina and Pennsylvania because of her father's job at DuPont. She was fun and liked to hang out with her friends. However, Maggie and her sister didn't have a close relationship growing up because Marion was older than her. But when Maggie became an adult, they developed a close relationship. Maggie was definitely a girly girl, but when she had her sons, she would spend time with them by fishing and hunting. She loved fishing, being on a boat, going to the beach, or going to an island. Marion currently resides in Charleston, South Carolina with Barton Proctor, who is her loving, longtime husband, unlike Alex. They have 3 beautiful adult daughters together, and they called Maggie their favorite aunt. Maggie was extremely close to her parents, Terry and Kennedy Branstetter, who reside in Summerville, South Carolina. They have not publicly spoken about Maggie or Paul's death. It was a major blow to their family. It was devastating for them to lose their grandson and their daughter, who they were very close to. Maggie's parents have been suffering ever since the night they received that devastating call that Maggie and Paul had died. Maggie's parents are up in age, and family members have reported that her dad Terry's health has been declining. Her parents were very proper, Maggie's friend from high school told the Post. Lisa Heineman Moore ran track in high school with Maggie between 1984 and 1986. They also attended Unionville High in Pennsylvania. She said, "We had our little cliques and we ran after boys and did a little partying and drinking. But I think her dreams were what she was taught. She was from the South, and the Southern dream for a girl at that time was to finish college, maybe. But more importantly, find a husband, get married, and have kids." Lisa said their friendship ended on a bad note because Maggie was always thin and teased Lisa about her extra weight. The two were teenagers, but Lisa couldn't tolerate Maggie teasing her, so they stopped being friends. Lisa also said this about Maggie. "She was just a pretty girl, wearing the same preppy clothes we all did. I remember us out in the fields drinking a 6-pack, but Margaret, we never called her Maggie, was always thin. She would pick at me for being heavier. But we all did and said things like that. She didn't deserve what happened to her. I think she got in too deep and didn't have a voice. But she had to be quiet on account of who she was married to. That was the tragedy, I think." Maggie's dad Terry's job with DuPont brought him and his family to Cooper River, South Carolina. Maggie enrolled at the University of South Carolina, where she met Alex Murdaugh, who was only 1 grade ahead of her. He was her first real boyfriend. Maggie was also a member of the Kappa Delta sorority. Throughout Alex's trial, little was heard about Maggie's life before her fatal death. Maggie's 2 friends, Ms. Price and Ms. West, told CBS they feel like Maggie was absolutely lost in the Murdaugh saga. The 3 friends met in college at the University of South Carolina, where they all attended together. Ms. Price said that she was Maggie's big sister in the Kappa Delta sorority, and after Maggie and her 2 friends graduated, Maggie and Ms. West lived together. All three stayed very close friends over the years, and they both were part of Maggie's wedding to Alex. Alex was Maggie's first real boyfriend, her friend told the Post. But her decision to marry him came at a price, her friend said. Alex said Maggie had to move with him to Hampton, a rural town where the Murdaughs have ruled as prosecutors and civil attorneys since 1910, but there isn't so much as a Walmart in Hampton. They got married on August 14, 1993, and this would be the beginning of a tragic end. Maggie wore a white dress, a white veil, and what looked like white pearls around her neck. She wore her hair short. They got married at Second Presbyterian Church. Their wedding reception was at the Hibernian Hall, and their honeymoon was in Jamaica. When you read the wedding announcement and look at how happy and beautiful Maggie looked, it will blow your mind, how tragic their story ended, and the sheer horror she experienced coming face to face with Alex Murdaugh while he was chasing her trying to hunt her down and shoot her on the tragic night of her death. Maggie didn't like living in Hampton, but she loved Alex and the status connected to the Murdaugh's last name. She valued status. She was proud of the Murdaugh's last name and used to always tell her sons, "You're a Murdaugh," making them think they were above the law. People feared the Murdaughs, and for a long time the same rules that applied to the rest of the world didn't apply to them. Maggie had two sons, Buster, who was born in 1996, and Paul was born in 1999. People said that Maggie was closer to Buster because Paul had attachment issues as a result of Maggie having postpartum depression after Paul was born. Paul didn't get a chance to develop a mother and child bond while he was a baby, and he had autism. Although Maggie couldn't bond with Paul from the time he was born, she always showed up for both of her sons' school and sports events. She spent time with them doing things they enjoyed, like going hunting and fishing with them. She loved both of her sons, although their housekeeper Gloria Satterfield was the only person who had the patience to deal with Paul and support him emotionally. Paul was a troubled child who had autism, mental health issues, attachment issues, behavior issues, and an alcohol addiction that went untreated. Maggie couldn't control Paul. He was out of control since he was a little kid. Instead of Maggie getting him the proper help he needed to find solutions to help him cope with his mental and behavior issues, she allowed him to drink his problems away starting at an early age. Maggie was a full-time homemaker, but she owned a gift shop in Hampton. Maggie loved Alex, and it showed, but he hid a lot of stuff from her. He hid his crimes, his financial problems, drug problems, and affairs. Alex cheated on Maggie at least 2 times. The first time Alex cheated on Maggie, she forgave him, and they were able to work things out. But it was still a sensitive topic in their marriage, enough to bring it up with her sister before she died. She did not think anything was still going on. It just bothered her. But Maggie made Alex leave the house years ago when she first became suspicious of his affair. Before Maggie's death, her and Paul found Alex's pill stash, and they confronted him about it. How was Maggie's personality? People have mixed feelings about the kind of person they remember Maggie as. Some people describe her as strong, quiet, and down-to-earth, while some people describe her as thinking she was better than other people and looking down on the people in her community. Some people said she was free-spirited, witty, a good mom, a good wife, a good person, and loving but unorganized. Alex said he thought his wife was loving, a good mom, a good wife, and a good person. But you can't believe anything he says with his web of lies. From the information I gathered, it seems like Maggie treated everyone differently, but if you weren't on her level financially, she didn't want to be bothered or associated with you. People in the community said she looked down on everyone in Hampton because it's a rural place with a lot of poor people living there. She hated being in Hampton, and she didn't like being at Moselle either, but she loved being at her Edisto beach house. Maggie spent her last days on Earth at her Edisto property, the place she loved the most. She was looking forward to her 4th of July celebration at her Edisto beach house. On the day of Maggie's death, Alex lured her to Moselle, but she didn't want to leave because she was getting work done on her Edisto beach house to prepare for her upcoming party, so she left the workers at her house alone, telling them to lock up when they was done. Thinking she was leaving to take care of a family emergency with Alex, but she did have a bad feeling about him. Maggie's friends said she wasn't the type of person that would stand out in a crowd, but she was always there, to back everybody up. She loved her family, her boys. She was also very close to her parents and her sister. She was a dutiful wife, supporting Alex. She was a person, she was a mother, she was a sister, she was a friend, she was a daughter. Rayanita Soto Tutin was a friend of Maggie and her sons were friends with Paul. She described Paul as Happy, lively, bright, and well-spoken young man who loved hunting, fishing, and being with friends. She described Maggie as a hospitable friend who loved to entertain, a loving and devoted mother, and a wonderful person who supported local businesses and the community. Regardless of all the rumors, these are two lovely people that we have lost. A family member told the Post, Maggie was more down to earth. She'd let her hair down and drop some F-bombs and tell you to piss off if she felt like it. She had a great dry sense of humor. She had this thing where she'd roll her eyes when someone was doing something stupid, like Alec or Paul. Maggie was by far their favorite Murdaugh. She bent over backwards for her kids, maybe to a fault. Those boys wanted for nothing. A friend of the family named Omer said, "They are not the monsters the other media outlets are portraying them to be." My problem with all of this is that, regardless of how anyone feels about Paul's past, a family lost a son, a grandson, a brother, nephew, and cousin. And Maggie paid the ultimate price as well. Our community has lost sight in the fact that two people have lost their lives, said Jin. Most times in our community, when there is a tragic death, we pull together, put all things aside, and support them. It should be no different for this family. God is love, and we should show it no matter what others think or opinions that are spoken. A husband and father now have to live this life without his life partner and a child. His remaining child now has to live this life without his mother and a brother. We should not focus on the past or mistakes made, but the fact that there is a family that just had their world turned upside down. This family has my prayers, and love is being sent their way as they have a very tough journey ahead. Alex provided a luxurious lifestyle for Maggie and their sons, but it came at a price that was paid by the victims that he stole money from. Maggie never knew Alex was a thief, and he was stealing money from his clients because she didn't pay attention to where he got his money from, or how he spent it as long as she was comfortable with her life. Maggie didn't care until after she started thinking about divorcing him. Most of Alex's clients that he stole from were the same poor people from the community of Hampton that Maggie looked down on, didn't like or want to be bothered with. These poor people deserved their money after all they went through, and they also needed their settlement money to provide a better life for themselves and their families. But Alex took that opportunity away from them. Maggie lived a life of luxury. She didn't want for anything. She was living the American dream. She had a nanny and housekeeper in a big house. She didn't have to cook or clean, and she had help raising her sons. They had beach houses, private islands, a hunting lodge, vacation homes, expensive clothes, and a small private plane. Maggie went on expensive trips, and she loved beach houses and beaches. She always enjoyed spending the summers at her Edisto beach house. She never flew commercial. The whole family always chartered jets, but Paul told his friends they had a plane hangar and a small plane at Moselle for drugs and strippers. Maggie loved talking about the latest trends in hair and makeup with her nieces who said she was their favorite aunt. When it comes to the Gloria Satterfield case, people always wondered if Maggie or Paul pushed her down the steps and caused her fatal fall. What do you think? Don't forget to like and subscribe. How did Maggie's housekeeper Gloria Satterfield die? Did she fall, or was she pushed? Maggie visited Gloria Satterfield in the hospital, but was she complicit in her death? Gloria's sons don't think her death was a homicide, but they do want to exhume her body so they can get a second autopsy done and make sure it wasn't a homicide. Maggie did donate to at least one charity that we know about. A few months before Maggie's death, she was upset that one of her checks that she made to a charity bounced. Maggie also worried about money being demanded from her family in the lawsuit from Paul's boat crash. She was very suspicious that Alex wasn't being entirely honest with her in the days before her death. Her housekeeper, Blanca Turrubiate Simpson, said Maggie was concerned about the amount of money that they were requesting in that lawsuit. $30 million is what she told me. She said that Maggie knew the amount of money they were asking for, but she said we don't have that kind of money. Blanca recalled Maggie telling her, before she admitted she would give everything to make the lawsuit disappear. She would be willing to start over, and was worried that Alex was not being transparent about what was really going on with the litigation when prosecutors threatened to expose his financial crimes. "He doesn't tell me everything," Maggie said in the conversation with Blanca. Maggie got to the point where she had enough of Alex's drug addiction, financial problems, and his deception. Maggie started looking for a forensic accountant to find out where their money was going before her death. She didn't pay close attention to the family money or where it came from, but she was starting to look into it because she didn't have much money in her account. Her checks were bouncing, and she was considering a divorce. The most dangerous time for anyone is when they get ready to leave their husband or wife. Maggie and Alex had been growing apart and were living separate lives when she died. Maggie stayed at her cottage in Edisto Beach, and Alex stayed at the hunting lodge at Moselle. There are rumors that she went to meet with a divorce attorney before her death. Their marriage was absolutely on the rocks, a person close to the family told the Daily Mail. Alex and Maggie didn't look at each other like they were married. There was no love lost between them. I never saw them touch or be affectionate to each other. People News stated that Maggie reportedly saw a divorce lawyer just 6 weeks before her death. A law enforcement source aware of the case revealed that she met with a divorce lawyer once and began to explore her marital assets and finances for a possible split. Maggie drove 1 hour from the family's home into Charleston to meet with a lawyer to explore her options about ending her marriage to Alex. What happened during that consultation is unknown, but Maggie was also looking for a forensic accountant to look into the family finances to determine the state of their marital assets. Maggie's death was a part of Alex Murdaugh's sick and delusional plot to eliminate his wife and son. Alex planned his elimination plot at least 6 months before their deaths. The Beach's family attorney, Mark Tinsley, said that he gave Alex the opportunity to get his wife Maggie off of the Mallory Beach lawsuit, but he chose to throw her under the bus and take her down with him. Alex also told Maggie's sister that whoever did it had been planning this for a long time. On the day that Alex's plot unfolded, he lured Maggie to Moselle, then brutally shot her to death while she was trying to run and get away from him. After she died, he ran over her legs with an ATV trying to get away from the crime scene because Maggie's leg were marked up with ATV tire marks. I want to apologize and make a correction about Maggie Murdaugh in the True Crime Stories podcast, episode 3. A few people made comments and told me that Maggie did go into the house to eat. She was at Moselle for a short period of time, but the autopsy did confirm that her and Paul had the same contents in their stomachs, so they did sit down and eat dinner together. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I really appreciate you guys. After Maggie's and Paul's deaths, many people came to Moselle to show their condolences and bring food to Alex, the perpetrator, who was responsible for their deaths. The master manipulator Alex planned their deaths, and then planned their funeral. Maggie and Paul Murdaugh's public funeral was 4 days after they died on June 11, 2021. The mother and son's burial site is close to late family members Randolph Murdaugh, Paul's great-great-grandfather, and his great-grandfather Randolph Buster Murdaugh. They were joined by Randolph Murdaugh, Maggie's father-in-law, several days later after he passed at the age of 85. A public funeral for the two victims drew in hundreds of attendees, from public officials to close friends to law enforcement. Hampton Chapel's People's Road and Funeral Home assisted the Murdaugh family with the funeral arrangements and the graveside service. Maggie's obituary said, Margaret Maggie Kennedy Branstetter Murdaugh, 52, entered into eternal rest with her son Paul Terry Murdaugh, the evening of Monday, June 7, 2021. Margaret Maggie Kennedy Branstetter. Murdaugh graduated from the University of South Carolina in 1991, where she met her husband, Alex. She was a member of the Kappa Delta sorority and kept in touch with many of these friends over the years. Maggie and Alex, who worked in the PMPED law firm, raised their 2 sons in Hampton, South Carolina, and enjoyed spending their summers at their beach house in Edisto. She adored her family and cherished spending time on the boat with her 2 sons. She will be remembered as a second mom to her sons' many friends. Maggie and Paul Murdaugh are still buried in temporary graves almost 2 years after their brutal deaths outside the dog kennels at Moselle. A cemetery worker told a Post photographer, the headstones for Maggie and Paul are still delayed, but didn't specify exactly what that meant. There are photos online showing their graves surrounded by dead leaves and fake flowers. Did you listen to Alex's prison call with Buster when he told him to put flowers on his mom's grave? Buster was photographed with his girlfriend Brooklyn White on an emotional visit to his mom and brother's grave. Buster was sad, although he picked up a small statue of Maggie's favorite dog and placed it on his mother's grave. The Murdaugh's family dog, Bubba, became a key player in placing Alex at the scene and convicting him. Jurors heard the yellow Labrador, who was in the family kennel the night Maggie and Paul were shot dead. Bubba's presence was damning for Alex, who was heard talking to Bubba on Paul's video recording at the kennel. The prosecutors focused on cell phone video recorded by Paul minutes before his death. Alex's voice can be heard in the background ordering Bubba, who had a habit of disturbing chickens and birds, to leave the animals alone. Where is Bubba now? Bubba is living with the Murdaugh's old housekeeper, Blanca. What makes this story even more tragic is that Alex was not sorry and will never be sorry for what he did. He is a narcissist without a conscience and the capability to admit what he did was wrong or show remorse for any of his victims. Thank you for watching.